At lumber operations near Camp Shelby, Mississippi, prisoners operated modern mechanical saws that processed pine trees into dimensional lumber at rates that astonished technically minded Germans. Safety protocols required protective goggles, gloves, and regular equipment inspections. When a German prisoner suffered a minor hand injury at the Hollis Lumber Company in July 1943, he received immediate medical treatment identical to that provided to civilian workers, followed by 3 paid rest days, treatment inconceivable for forced laborers in Germany. The contrast to German forced labor camps could not have been sharper. In Nazi work camps, Polish and Russian laborers regularly worked 14-hour days without breaks, received minimal rations regardless of energy expenditure, and faced severe punishment for productivity shortfalls. Death from exhaustion was common enough to require special paperwork. German POWs, many former administrators of this brutal system, now experience the inverse, humane treatment generating superior productivity through worker well-being rather than fear. I observed an American farm that produced more with 8-hour workdays than our estate in Prussia, managed with 12-hour schedules, wrote a German agricultural officer in a letter later preserved in the National Archives. The workers moved quickly, not from fear, but from proper rest and nutrition. This efficiency through humane treatment contradicts everything I was taught about labor management. At California canneries, prisoners learned industrial food processing using assembly line techniques. Each worker performed specialized tasks, sorting, cutting, cooking, packaging, in climate-controlled environments with mechanical assistance for heavy lifting. The regular rest periods, clean facilities, and injury protocols revealed an industrial philosophy that valued human capital. This respect for human potential, even enemy potential, delivered profound ideological challenges. Skills acquisition occurred organically through workplace immersion. POWs at Camp Trinidad, Colorado, learned modern irrigation techniques while maintaining sugar beet fields. Prisoners at Camp Wheeler, Georgia, observed scientific forest management while clearing fire breaks. Former tankers with mechanical aptitude found themselves repairing American farm equipment, learning standardized parts systems and maintenance schedules that German agriculture had not yet implemented. Most revelatory was the treatment POWs received from civilian supervisors. Rather than hostile overseers, American managers typically displayed professional respect for competent work. They judged us by our labor, not our uniform, recalled a former Panzer crewman who worked in Michigan orchards. When I devised a better picking technique, the foreman implemented it immediately and thanked me by name. An enemy thanking a prisoner for ideas, this moment changed my understanding of work completely. The canteen system where wages were spent further reinforced workplace dignity. POWs receiving 80 cents daily could purchase personal items, supplementary food, or educational materials. At Fort Kearny, Nebraska, canteen records show average monthly POW purchases including razors, 40 signals NOMS writing paper, 15 NORS NOP tobacco products, varying prices, candy bars, 5 cans decadent 77, NOP decadent, barkend decadent, correspondence courses, $14 monthly. This economic agency, choosing purchases based on individual preference, represented freedom within captivity that Nazi Germany denied even to its free citizens. The dignity of compensated work had begun restructuring German concepts of labor itself. The financial system established for German POWs introduced them to American banking practices that would later influence post-war European economic development. Each prisoner received an individual numbered account documented in meticulous ledgers that recorded deposits, interest accrual, and withdrawals. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, which administered the program, issued quarterly statements showing each prisoner's accumulating capital. For men who had survived the chaotic German military payment system, where soldiers often went months without compensation, this clockwork financial precision demonstrated American organizational capacity beyond battlefield applications. By December 1943, the average working prisoner had accumulated $137.60 in savings, $2,296 in 2023 dollars, with deductions for daily canteen allowances. Prison camp financial records, preserved in the National Archives, document precise expenditure patterns. At Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, September 1943, financial records show prisoners allocating funds with unexpected sophistication: 32% to immediate canteen purchases, 41% to savings accounts, and 27% to international money orders sent to families in Germany. These remittances, coordinated through the International Red Cross, delivered perhaps the most profound psychological impact: enemy prisoners sending financial support to German families, while Nazi leadership could not adequately provide for its own civilian population. The introduction of camp scrip mise tokenized currency valid only within camp boundaries created miniature economies that replicated free market principles. Camp Shelby, Mississippi, issued cardboard tokens in denominations of 5, 10, and 25 cents, while Camp Clark, Missouri, utilized aluminum coins stamped with precise monetary values. These tangible financial instruments educated prisoners in capitalist exchange principles, value representation, purchasing power, and consumer choice. "I held these tokens with wonderment," recalled a former Afrika Korps radio operator in a 1985 interview preserved at the U.S. Army Military History Institute. After years of increasingly worthless rice marks and military vouchers, these simple coins maintained perfect value stability. "I could reliably purchase the same quantity of goods each week." This predictability revealed everything wrong with our own economic management. The psychology of choice permeated prisoner spending decisions. Unlike German rationing, which allocated identical items regardless of individual preference, American canteens offered selection. Prisoners could purchase tobacco products or chocolate, writing materials or playing cards, coffee or soft drinks. This consumer sovereignty, medius, deciding for oneself rather than receiving state allocation, delivered daily lessons in democratic capitalism. Camp Ellis, Illinois canteen records from October 1943 document 150 distinct products available for purchase, from Colgate toothpaste, tantrums to Parker fountain pens, $1.35, Hershey chocolate bars, 5 counts to religious texts, varying prices. The contrast with German civilian conditions proved particularly destabilizing for Nazi ideology. While prisoners purchased supplementary food with their earnings, German civilians faced severe rationing: 275 grams of meat weekly, when available, 300 grams of sugar monthly, coffee and chocolate essentially unobtainable. Letters from home described deteriorating conditions even as prisoners gained weight in American captivity. This inverted reality, enemies prospering while loyal citizens suffered, fundamentally undermined faith in Nazi economic management. Entrepreneurship emerged within camp economies as prisoners recognized market opportunities. At Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, prisoner financial records document informal businesses emerging: letter writing services, 5 counts per page, tailoring, varying rates, art production, portraits for T5 contourants to $1, language lessons, 10 shrams per session, and technical training classes, varying rates. These micro-enterprises, operating with tacit American permission, demonstrated capitalist principles in miniature. By war's end, financial records document 372,000 German POWs had collectively earned $22,476,000 in wages, with approximately $12,500,000 held in savings accounts for repatriation. These accumulated funds, representing both material wealth and ideological transformation, would soon return to a devastated Germany, carrying economic lessons learned through the mathematics of fair compensation in American prison camps. The transformation of German prisoners through American labor extended far beyond financial compensation, fundamentally altering their vocational identities and technical capabilities. Former Wehrmacht officers, who had commanded men through fear and military discipline, found themselves learning democratic management techniques in American workplaces. At Camp Gordon Johnston, Florida, German officers assigned to supervisory positions discovered suggestion boxes where workers, including POWs, submitted process improvements that managers seriously considered. This participatory approach contradicted the rigid hierarchy of German military and industrial organization, where innovation flowed exclusively from top leadership. Technical skill acquisition accelerated through formal and informal apprenticeships. The War Department established vocational training programs at 17 major camps, where prisoners could earn certification in trades ranging from electrical wiring to automotive repair, carpentry to agricultural management. At Camp Stoneman, California, 215 prisoners completed a standardized course in modern irrigation techniques, learning mathematical principles of water flow, equipment maintenance, and scientific crop management. Fort Riley, Kansas, operated a comprehensive agricultural instruction program where prisoners studied soil science, mechanical harvesting, and crop rotation, knowledge that would prove invaluable in rebuilding German agriculture. American farmers, initially hesitant to work alongside enemies, became unintentional instructors. A cotton farmer near Camp Shelby, Mississippi, demonstrated mechanical cotton picking to a former Panzer commander who had never seen such technology. This single machine replaced 50 manual laborers, the German officer later wrote in a memoir. Yet the American explained that higher wages for fewer skilled operators ultimately reduced production costs while improving worker conditions. This inverted our entire understanding of labor economics. Industrial efficiency techniques particularly influenced technically minded prisoners. At lumber operations near Camp Crossville, Tennessee, prisoners observed standardized milling processes that minimized waste while maximizing worker safety. The American practice of providing workers with jigs, templates, and measurement guides, rather than relying solely on skilled craftsmanship, demonstrated mass production principles that would later transform German manufacturing. Military records document 32 German engineers formally studying American production methods at various camps, many taking extensive notes on techniques to implement after repatriation. Democratic workplace practices delivered perhaps the most profound ideological challenge. Safety committees at Camp Clinton, Mississippi, included elected prisoner representatives who met weekly with American managers to address hazardous conditions. Suggestion systems at food processing facilities near Camp Hearn, Texas, solicited process improvements from line workers, including prisoners. These participatory structures contradicted the authoritarian management Germans had experienced under National Socialism, where worker input was discouraged as undermining authority. Personal connections formed between prisoners and employers, despite language barriers and enemy status. A Michigan orchard owner formally requested the same German prisoners each harvest season, noting their superior work and innovative picking techniques. A cannery manager near Camp Wheeler, Georgia, praised German efficiency improvements that increased production 12% and reduced waste. These professional relationships, documented in camp correspondence, created cognitive dissonance for prisoners indoctrinated to view Americans as inferior. Prisoner testimonies reveal the psychological impact of this vocational transformation. In Germany, I was a bank clerk before conscription, wrote a prisoner from Camp Clark, Missouri. In America, I learned mechanical repair through their vocational program. I fixed motors, maintained irrigation pumps, and eventually supervised other prisoners in maintenance operations. This practical education gave me capabilities beyond anything in my previous life. Camp newspapers across the nation advertised specialized training opportunities alongside labor assignments. De Roof, published at Fort Kearny, Nebraska, listed positions with corresponding wages, skill requirements, and advancement potential. Educational programs connected to work assignments offered English language instruction contextually relevant to specific industries. This integration of work with education created comprehensive development opportunities that prisoners recognized as valuable for post-war civilian life, further eroding commitment to Nazi ideology in favor of pragmatic skill acquisition. The repatriation process between 1945 and 1947 returned 372,000 transformed German prisoners to their homeland. These men arrived carrying more than the army-issued suitcases containing their possessions. They brought accumulated savings averaging $175 per man, $2,450 in 2023, technical knowledge of American production methods, and fundamentally altered perceptions of economic systems. While their physical appearance, healthy, well-fed bodies, stood in stark contrast to the malnourished German civilian population, their psychological transformation proved even more profound. The devastated German landscape magnified the impact of their American experience. Former prisoners who had operated modern harvesters in Nebraska wheat fields returned to farms where horses pulled wooden plows through depleted soil. Men who had worked in electrified California canneries found German factories reduced to rubble. This visceral contrast between American abundance and German devastation created immediate motivation to implement lessons learned in captivity. Statistical analysis of prisoner earnings reveals the economic foundation for transformation. Military records document total POW wages of $22,476,000, with approximately 58% $13,036,080 returned to Germany as personal savings or family remittances. These funds, though modest individually, provided critical startup capital in a nation where currency reform had rendered savings worthless. Former prisoners used these American dollars to establish small businesses, modeling American operations they had experienced. The Wirtschaftswunder, the German economic miracle of the 1950s, bears unmistakable imprints of the POW labor experience. Ludwig Erhard, architect of West Germany's economic reforms, noted in his memoirs that returning prisoners provided practical examples of American production efficiency that influenced policy development. Ernst Wolf, a former POW who had worked in Oregon lumber mills, established a furniture factory in Baden-Württemberg utilizing standardized measurements, workflow optimization, and worker safety protocols he had observed in America. By 1955, his operation employed 78 workers and exported products throughout Europe. Long-term correspondence between former prisoners and American employers documents enduring connections. The Michigan apple orchard owner, who had employed prisoners from Camp Custer, wrote regularly to his former workers through the 1950s, eventually sponsoring 2 families for immigration. A Texas cotton farmer maintained Christmas card exchanges with 7 former prisoners for over 3 decades. These personal relationships, preserved in university archives, demonstrate how economic cooperation overcame wartime enmity. Historical analysis confirms the labor program's substantial contribution to denazification. Military intelligence reports from 1947 note that former POWs who had worked in America showed significantly lower rates of continued Nazi sympathy compared to those held in other Allied nations. The democratic workplace practices they had experienced, participatory management, merit-based advancement, profit incentives, provided practical alternatives to authoritarian systems they had previously accepted. An elderly former prisoner, interviewed for a 1985 documentary, summarized this transformation. "I arrived in America believing Germans were superior workers, implementing superior systems. I returned understanding that dignity in labor, being treated as a valuable human with ideas worth hearing, produces both greater happiness and greater productivity. This lesson shaped everything I built in post-war Germany." The legacy continues in modern German-American business relationships. Companies established by former prisoners pioneered transatlantic partnerships throughout the 1960s. The Baden-Württemberg industrial region, where former POWs were concentrated, developed particularly strong American business connections. Contemporary German emphasis on worker councils, technical education, and collaborative management bears the imprint of lessons first learned through compensated prisoner labor. What began as shocking disbelief at receiving payment from enemies evolved into a fundamental reimagining of economic possibilities. The men who arrived as Nazi warriors indoctrinated in beliefs of racial superiority and military necessity returned as witnesses to a different path: productivity through freedom rather than coercion, abundance through cooperation rather than conquest. Their experience demonstrates how meaningful work with fair compensation accomplished what military defeat alone could not: the complete transformation of enemy hearts and minds through the simple dignity of being valued for one's labor. July 1943, Camp Forrest, Tennessee. The German officer stared at the slip of paper in his hand, unable to comprehend its significance. $21.60, payment for his month's labor at a nearby cotton farm. After 2 years commanding Panzer units across North Africa, following orders that labeled Americans as decadent capitalists, this document, this American paycheck, represented impossibility, made tangible. An enemy soldier, captured in battle, now compensated for his work at the same rate as civilian laborers. The sun-weathered paper trembled slightly in his fingers as he calculated the conversion. Approximately 86 Reichsmarks, more than a skilled German laborer might earn in peacetime. Yet here it was, payment for picking cotton alongside 19 other prisoners, all receiving identical compensation regardless of their former military rank or social status. The democratic nature of the payment system itself delivered the first ideological shock. The Geneva Convention of 1929, which both America and Germany had signed, permitted the use of enlisted POWs as laborers, requiring reasonable compensation. What astonished the arriving Germans wasn't the work itself. They had expected forced labor, but the systematic implementation of fair payment. According to War Department Directive PMG 25.1, issued March 19, 1943, all working prisoners would receive exactly 80 cents per day, with 10 cents available immediately and the remainder held in personal accounts. Across America that summer, 372,000 German prisoners of war encountered this same financial revelation. Nazi indoctrination had prepared them for exploitation, for labor camps modeled after their own infamous system. Instead, they received numbered accounts, payment stubs, and purchasing power. Military records confirm that by December 1943, the POW labor program had expanded to include approximately 90% of all capable prisoners, creating the largest paid enemy workforce in modern military history. For men who had survived the collapsing Afrika Korps, where supply lines had disintegrated months before surrender, the concept of surplus, of having currency beyond immediate survival needs, seemed alien. Many prisoners initially suspected propaganda or psychological warfare. Their letters home, censored but preserved in military archives, reveal profound confusion. "They pay us American wages to work," wrote one Feldwebel from Camp Forrest. "I have an account with actual money. This cannot be reconciled with what we were told." The simple act of holding currency triggered visceral responses: the crisp texture of dollar bills, the metallic weight of coins, the ritualistic counting of change. These sensory experiences of capitalism delivered deeper impressions than any propaganda film. Financial choice minus the ability to decide between purchasing cigarettes, chocolate, or saving for the future introduced agency that prisoners had not experienced under their own military system. A lieutenant from Rommel's headquarters staff, captured near Tunis, recorded his reaction in a diary eventually preserved at the Army Military History Institute. "I watched American guards buy Coca-Cola with the same currency I now possess. They use identical money, identical purchasing methods. I hold in my hand the physical evidence that contradicts everything we were taught about American class hierarchies." This initial financial shock would gradually transform into a profound re-education. What began as disbelief at receiving payment from enemies would evolve into complete reassessment of economic systems, planting the seeds of German post-war recovery. The mathematics of fair compensation were being written in dollars and cents, revealing an American economic philosophy that rendered German militarism not noble sacrifice, but fundamental misallocation of human potential. America, 1943. A manpower crisis gripped the nation. With 11.5 million American men serving in uniform, agricultural fields lay untended, canneries stood understaffed, and lumber mills struggled to meet wartime demand. This unprecedented labor shortage threatened both the domestic economy and the military supply chain. The solution emerged from an unexpected resource: the growing population of enemy prisoners arriving on American shores. War Department records document the systematic development of the POW labor program. Initially conceived as a cost-saving measure to reduce the $2 daily maintenance cost per prisoner, the program's May 1943 authorization by Assistant Secretary of War John J. McCloy quickly evolved into an essential economic component. The Military Police Command established processing centers at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where German prisoners underwent skills assessment, security classification, and labor assignment. Military intelligence officers categorized prisoners into 3 security classes, with devoted Nazis marked Class I and restricted to secure facilities, while the majority received Class II or Class III designations, permitting off-camp work details. By August 1943, the geographic distribution of prisoner labor extended nationwide. Military records confirm the establishment of 155 base camps and 511 satellite work camps by year's end, rising to 511 base camps and 3,287 branch camps by 1945. This vast network stretched from New Hampshire apple orchards to Washington lumber mills, forming a labor infrastructure that would eventually generate $22 million in prisoner wages, $330 million in 2023 dollars, while producing agricultural and industrial output valued at approximately $280 million. At Camp Clark, Missouri, 1,800 prisoners harvested 424,000 bushels of wheat during the critical 1943 harvest, saving crops that would otherwise have rotted in fields. Camp Hearn, Texas deployed 720 men daily to nearby cotton operations, harvesting 25,000 acres that supplied military uniform production. The numerical precision of American organization astounded technically minded German officers who observed labor allocation systems that exceeded Wehrmacht logistics capabilities. Initial American hesitation to employ the enemy quickly yielded to pragmatic necessity. The War Food Administration's records document the agricultural emergency, 40% reduction in available farm labor nationwide, with critical shortages in cotton 63%, fruit 51%, and vegetable production 44%. National security required feeding both civilians and military personnel, making prisoner labor an essential war resource rather than charitable employment. The voluntary nature of prisoner labor created unforeseen psychological impact. While the Geneva Convention permitted compelling enlisted men to work, American camp commanders instituted voluntary sign-up systems, with prisoners selecting preferred assignments from posted listings. This element of choice, foreign to German military discipline, created immediate cognitive dissonance. Nazi officers, accustomed to command through compulsion, watched as the American system generated higher productivity through incentivized participation. "I worked harder voluntarily in America than I ever did under orders in Germany," a former Wehrmacht sergeant later testified to researchers from the University of Tennessee in 1957. "The voluntary system confused me completely. I kept waiting for punishment or decreased rations if I declined work. When neither came, I volunteered for logging work simply to understand this system." Unlike forced labor in Germany, where foreign workers received reduced rations and suffered extreme punishment for underperformance, American farms and factories maintained identical standards for prisoners and civilian employees. The same field foremen who supervised American farmers directed German prisoners, using identical productivity expectations, rest periods, and safety protocols. This equality of treatment delivered daily lessons in democratic industrial organization, lessons that would later transform post-war German manufacturing methods. Work environments across America delivered daily revelations to German prisoners. In California's Sacramento Valley, POWs harvested tomatoes alongside Mexican braceros and local women, all receiving identical hourly treatment. The rhythmic labor, bend, pick, toss, move, proceeded under standardized rest schedules, 10 minutes every 2 hours, 30-minute lunch breaks, 8-hour workdays. Field supervisors distributed water hourly when temperatures exceeded 85 degrees. These humane conditions contradicted everything prisoners had witnessed in German labor practices.